just energetic from Earth. Earth being disturbed, so they're messing with the residents of the Houston house. This was the first actual home in the town.
Really?
So yeah, so it housed the entire family. Plus, it served as the first church and the first school until those buildings were built.
And we're going to follow you upstairs.
Right here, you leave them on. Until...
My psych degree, I would say that you have a bit of a Thanatos complex.
Do they have a lot of people come in here and eat?
They do. The community kind of rallies around the place. They try really hard to support it. Like I said, they have a lot of sponsors for the place as well. And you can see like each table has a sponsor plaque. And they get donations from their sponsors for their fundraising meals and things like that.
Is there like a specific amount to donate, or do you?
You donate whatever. It's kind of based on generosity of the heart, like a spontaneous generosity of the heart. Whatever you feel you can give is appreciated and gratefully accepted.
Yeah.
Certain fundraising events will have a set amount, just depending on how big the fundraising event is. At other times we had a pie auction. That was amazing. I mean, we had a couple of pies go for as much as $150 a pie.
That's awesome.
So people really do open their pockets for the place. I mean, we love this place. It's over 100 years old. It's a fixture in this community. There isn't anybody that grew up in this area that doesn't know about the Houston house. Helen Houston and the Harrison Houston family, they were here, the whole family here, for over 100 years.
Well, do you have like a Facebook page or something that tells when there's different sponsored events?
We have, well, the Houston house hasn't got a specific Facebook of its own. I've been trying to get the board to maybe do that for it. But Newburg actually has a page for the Houston house on their Newburg site. So it's newburgmo.org, I think, is what the website is. Okay. But you can actually Google Newburg, Missouri, and it's like the first top.
So to keep you up to date on whatever sponsored events they have.
And it's because this place is owned specifically by the Newburg Community Revitalization Program Group. They have a website as well. They have an NCRPG website that they put some of their stuff on. But they kind of share it out. I mean, they own the property, but the Houston house really belongs to the city.
Right.
It belongs to all the people. So
I love that they do this. It's very cool.
It is. It really is cool. And I mean, like I said, this place was the first bed and breakfast. It was the first hotel in Newburg. And the house in the back, their home residence, was the first home residence in Newburg. And this place opened January 1st, 1884.
Wow.
And it was the first day that the Railroad Roundhouse opened as well.
Where's that?
The Roundhouse, what's left of it is actually, if you step out the front of the Houston house and you look up First Street, over here is a big, huge field. At the far end of that field, there is the leftover foundation of the Roundhouse, and that's all that's there. There's this wonderful dream that at some point we can even restore the Roundhouse. We would love to do it, but that kind of funds, we would need a major backer, somebody who maybe has a love for the railroad itself. I mean, the historical selling point of this town was that before the Frisco Railroad bought the area, it was nothing but a trading post and a couple of homesteaders here. Frisco Railroad bought the entire area, and they built Newburg specifically for the railroad. And it was a boomtown for years. It went through both world wars, and a lot of troops going to Fort Wood were cared for here, fed here. When they would stop at the depot to fill up on more water and coal, they would actually make food here and bring it out to them on the train. And the ladies would bring out huge baskets of food and just pass it out to the soldiers on the train. So, I mean, like I said, it's really steeped in history. And the depot is literally across the street in this direction. So when you step out on the front step, I mean, it was like the first place, natural progression, get off the train and go to the Houston house. So, very, very steeped in the history of the area.
So this is the oldest standing building then?
As far as we know.
In Newburg?
Yep.
That's very cool.
And he was kind of a...
This is the depot?
Yeah. He was kind of a, for the time period, he was a hotel mogul, basically.
Yeah.
He followed the railroad. He would get the scoop on where the railroad was going next.
Uh-huh.
And he would go ahead and build a hotel or a restaurant.
That's awesome.
But for some reason, when he got here, he stopped.
He liked it.
He stayed. And he did, in fact, die in the family residence in the back.
Really?
Yes.
So did they ever open that up for, I mean...
Well, here's the twist to that one. The lovely Lady Dr. Elizabeth, that is the curator for the museum, has some pretty strong beliefs because she is Native South American, born and raised. She did a lot of doctoring medicine out amongst the tribes in South Africa and dealt with shaman out there. And so she has some really strong beliefs about you shouldn't mess with things unless you're a shaman.
Right.
And so it unsettles her a little bit. She's allowed us to go in there about 3 times. And each time afterwards, you can tell there was a little bit of angst around it for her. She would ask us very pointed questions. Did you do anything? What happened? She wanted to know all the details. And I think majorly, she's just concerned for the welfare of the children. She doesn't want us stirring up anything that might make it a scary place. It's a children's museum now, and it needs to be fun and festive and brightly colored and safe.
Yeah.
And she feels like marrying it to potential paranormal activity is something that no parent wants to hear when they bring their kid to a museum, unless they're me.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, all of my kids ghost hunt with me, so you know, and I've got a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they are very upset that I did not bring them with me tonight because they really wanted to play with Peggy.
Oh, the little girl.
Okay. Yeah, they keep wanting to bring a set of jacks and a set of marbles.
So does anyone know the story about her?
The actual story behind Peggy?
Right. Is
like,
she
was
one
there
of
a real
the
person?
Houstons, or?
That's where it gets a little hinky. And that's the problem that we have. Because we have over 100 years of history in this place,
There's no telling.
we have really no clue who this girl really was. Now, I have done so much digging into the history of this place, just in the research, because it's, you know, when you're a paranormal investigator, that's what you do. You do a lot of digging up history. We should all have masters in history at this point. When I mean, we should go back to college and get a degree. I mean, as much time as we spend digging through musty old tomes about places and looking up death certificates and birth certificates and genealogies. What I did find in a book that was published by, I can't remember her name, but she published a book for Newburg, basically kind of as a fundraiser type of thing. In that, she does a 2-page spread on the Houston house, and in there, she talks about a Margaret, who was the daughter of a woman who worked in the kitchen here. And when she was little, she used to sleep in her little wicker basket back here in the kitchen while her mother cooked. And that she pretty much grew up in the Houston house. Apparently, this woman didn't have a home of her own, so she kind of lived at the Houston house. She was staff. There's talk about at some point in history they actually did house staff on the 3rd floor. And it was a women's dormitory. So, but Margaret, in those days, Peg was a nickname for Margaret. Don't ask me why.
Weird.
But it's a historical fact that Margaret, the pet name for Margaret was either Maggie, Mags, or Peg.
So I was going to ask you where you got the name Peggy.
Well, that was the thing. We didn't look for the name Peggy. We had one person here who is extremely sensitive, and you know, we were there. We were asking, you know, what's your name? What's your name? Can you tell us your name? And she just said, out of the blue, she just said, I think it's Peggy. And I was like, why Peggy? She goes, don't ask me. That's the name that came up.
So this might actually be Margaret.
This might very well be Margaret. And people say, okay, well, you know, do you have any history that she died a horrible death? And, you know, was there a tragedy? And it's like, I try to explain to people.
It doesn't really
Not
mean that.
every haunting is because of an unhappy end or even unfinished business. You know, we have 3 very different kinds of haunting. You have your residual hauntings, which is Memorex. It's not live, it's just a tape playing over and over again.
Right.
And that's what you will find on the 1st floor. You don't find any interactive, it's very rare that we get any kind of interaction that feels sentient. For the most part, you feel like you get a sense of busyness in these areas. It feels like it's a high traffic area, which it was. People are always coming and going, people are eating, people are visiting. Lots of memories are made in social settings.
So it's
it's
just that
steeped
energy
into the walls.
Yeah.
It's just all 100 years worth of, you know,
energy,
laughter and sorrow and coming and going. So And with the train, you know, you're talking about welcomes and goodbyes. And what's more
Right.
powerful than saying goodbye to a loved one or saying welcome back?
Mhm.
So, but then you get, you know, then you get your hauntings, your ghosts. And those are spirits that are trapped.
Mhm.
They're trapped here for whatever reason. Either it was unfinished business or it was a tragedy or something like that. But basically they're tied to something. Now that could be an object, it could be, you know, one of the rocks in the fireplace.
Right.
We don't know. It could be the location itself, and that's the problem. Nailing that down is very difficult. Finding the origin of a haunting can be very challenging because you
Right.
really don't know. I mean, we could have the spirit of the railroad marshal in here simply because we have the key he used every time he
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't know. So then you have that third kind of haunting, which is, you know, a completely free, untethered spirit who
Mhm.
simply returns to places where they remember things.
Mhm.
And they can come and go as they please. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not.
Mhm.
And those are, it's my feeling that Gramps, the one on the third floor that we talk about, is the old gentleman.
Mhm.
He feels very protective of the area. We're almost at a consensus. We've had about 20 different groups come through, and anyone that's had an interaction with that specific entity has felt very strongly that it is actually Mr. Harris. And that he just, this is his place. It was the last place that he was. He never left here. He died here, and he feels responsible for it. It's his place.
So who's Mr. Harris?
That's William Harris, the one that built the place.
Oh, okay.
And so that's who we've nicknamed Gramps, is the third floor individual. And he comes across as an older gentleman, very tall, very kind of austere. And from the time I was a little girl, I grew up in the area. And I had never set foot inside the Houston house until I was in my 30s.
Mhm.
But we have friends that live down here, and we would come out and play with them and go swimming in the river. And every time you drive through Newburg, I would tell my mom, even as a child, the house watches you. And she would say, okay, what do you mean it watches you? And I said, there's something on the third floor, and it watches. When you come in and when you come back through town, it watches. And as I got older, I asked other people that live here, and they were like, oh yeah, there's something on the third floor. Everybody in town knows there's something on the third floor. So, you know, everybody knew that. But it wasn't until the first time that I stepped on the third floor that I actually had my first interaction with Gramps. And it was, I got to the top of the stairs, and I felt two large hands on my shoulders. And it wasn't a harmful, it was just kind of like a, I'm here, and you need to be aware that I'm here. And then I heard, and this is a hard one to explain because people go, you heard it? And it's like, not heard it, but heard it.
Right.
This voice, an older man saying, what are you doing up here, girl?
Did
I
you
was
turn
like,
around and walk away?
No, I am one of those very rare individuals. I live for this stuff. You know, I tell people, you know, everybody has to follow their path. Mine just leads places where it usually requires a flashlight.
Right.
So, but I actually just stopped for a moment and got really still. And I said, I'm just looking around. I'm not here to harm anything. I don't want to cause any trouble. But, you know, we're going to have people coming here, and they're going to want to talk to you. And I got this, almost this kind of, this pullback, and it was like, well, I'm nobody's show pony. I'm not going to do tricks. And it was like, okay, well, you know, what if they're extremely respectful and very polite?
Yeah.
You know, will you interact with us then? And he said, I'll think about it, and I'll decide on a person-by-person basis who I will interact with. So it's very interesting because he's basically held true to that. Some people have interaction with him, and others he simply will not acknowledge. Doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
So, but again, he can go from the third floor to outside to the side yard. He goes wherever he wants. And sometimes we'll be here and we won't feel him all night. We won't have any interaction, which really leads me to believe that he isn't tethered at all. He comes and goes as he pleases.
Right.
And this is just that place. When it comes to Peggy, I don't think she was killed. I don't think that she died young. I think that she probably led a very fruitful life. But that because her entire childhood was spent in this place,
Like a
it's the
place of
place that
comfort.
was home.
Right.
So, you know, when you pass away and you want to go visit the place that meant the most to you, where all of your memories are, why wouldn't you go home?
Right.
So, I don't know. That's kind of my explanation. As to why she shows up as a little girl, people pay attention to little girls. People pay attention to children. We don't, you know, we notice that. That's something that stands out, a child. Whereas, you know, you might just overlook another person.
Right.
You know, a grown-up might not have nearly as much of your pull. We give a lot of energy to our children. We focus on them. When they're hurt and they cry, our hearts go out to them. They get a lot of our energy. Adults don't get so much of our energy, really. I mean, we tolerate each other. If we don't like each other, we're polite but distant.
Right.
So when you're dealing with ghosts that appear in an adult form, you have a totally different system for dealing with them. And I think that that's probably where Peggy goes around looking like a child. She may not be a child truly, but we give her a heck of a lot of our attention.
Yeah.
Because she's a child. So
Something to
it's
think
still kind of
about,
a mystery.
yeah.
But yeah, which is why my girls want to always come and play with her. And I've told them at some point we're going to do that. They keep waiting, and I keep kind of putting it off, and because that other entity on third likes to pick on little girls.
Right.
And my girls are not very fearful, but there's no sense in putting a child in a situation where they're going to be scared.
Right.
So my oldest daughter is 19, and she gets scared when Tommy messes with her. So this is one of those things.
Yeah.
But, so I'm hoping we'll get some interaction from Peggy tonight. It sounds like we've got 2 people. My sister Connie is very sensitive. So, and she's been patted, prodded, poked, and pushed by little hands on second. And it kind of flipped her out because both of us we're daytime activity people. It doesn't matter. It can be 2 o'clock in the morning or it can be 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If it's haunted, it's going to find us.
Right.
It's just that kind of a thing for us. And a lot of people are like, well, have you ever had any experiences when you're here alone? Well, I'm mostly here alone during the daytime. And yes, I have.
Yeah.
Well, what about at night? Well, no, not really. Not nearly as powerful as the ones that I've had at daylight. But I guess it's just, the difference.
You're not here at night though as much, huh?
Not as much. And more often than not, I'm here with a team. And I want them to have the experience. I've had 3 great years here at the Houston House doing this, and I've had the chance to do all kinds of field research. And I mean, this is a paranormal investigator's dream come true, to have a haunted location that you have full access to for as long as you want, anytime. You've got the keys to the castle. That makes you giddy.
Yeah.
So we've had a great run. We've been able to collect all kinds of data. We've been able to cross-reference one team's data with another team's data. They got the great EVP, the I Love You EVP, which, oh my God, it's totally awesome.
Who did she say that to again?
She said it to Jane.
Jane.
And Jane isn't with us. They got stationed somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
And so she's not with us tonight. But she's the one that actually got the I Love You EVP.
How cool is that?
It's very cool.
Yeah.
But the really neat thing was that it was, you can't say a place is haunted on the record. Not if you're a true investigator.
Right.
Because it's not legitimate. I mean, there's no way that I can prove to you this place is haunted.
Right.
You can't. Because for every piece of proof I give you, someone else can come in with more science and knowledge about energy and quantum physics.
Right.
And tell me all the reasons why it's my imagination, it's psychological. I ate bacon for dinner and my stomach was disagreeing with me. It wasn't a feeling, it was my intestines. So we never put, it's haunted in any of our reports. But when people ask me off the record, yeah, absolutely, 100%, this place is haunted. It is. It is haunted by spirits. It is residually haunted, and it is actively paranormal. And I think that it's wonderful that Joe's got the I Love You. Well, we had another team come in earlier this past year, and they got a picture.
Really?
On 3rd. And it's on our website.
much. You can go back there, huh? Oh, there's wires. See that?